Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, I would like to remind all participants that today's conference is being recorded. If anyone has any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Sir, you may begin.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is a presentation by IHE USA as well as ICSA Labs on the certification program and the pilot that we'll be doing at the 2013 North American Connectathon. I'd like to introduce Jim St. Clair from IHE USA. He's going to introduce the topic and begin the presentation.
Good morning, Vinny. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone today. As an introduction, the issue of certification and the concept around certification is built really on the changes in the landscape of health IT interoperability and how it's been evolving in the U.S. As I'm sure everyone is aware, Meaningful Use Stage 2 and the pending Stage 3 has been increasing the emphasis on interoperability and information exchange requirements, and in particular, health IT interoperability that leads to information exchange. In addition, the Affordable Care Act and health reform requires shared information for accountable and integrated care, and more specifically, the expansion of the Nationwide Health Information Network, or NewHIN, and regional exchange initiatives such as the New York, New Jersey Interoperability Working Group are all pointing to a new direction, as we would describe it, that interoperability is going for health IT in the United States. Of course, a key facet of IHE USA's mission is advancing health information exchange among care providers across care settings in the U.S. And IHE USA serves as the National Deployment Committee of IHE International and is responsible for the technical deployment of IHE technical frameworks, which are the standards that IHE creates to help facilitate interoperability amongst health systems and health IT components and promote information exchange for accountable care and purposes of the betterment of care in accordance with meaningful use. As part of that, IHE is offering a number of services and expanding those to enable local, regional, and nationwide health information exchange and support health information exchanges as necessary. Everyone, of course, is familiar with testing at the IHE North American Connectathon and other testing modes and venues throughout the U.S. as well as through the world. And now a new focus on our part around what we call the Projectathon, or project-specific testing, that reflects these changes around concepts such as the NewHIN exchange, the regional information exchange initiatives, and the concepts of new specifications developed around interoperable standards that require a new level of testing beyond what the Connectathon has traditionally provided, and in specific environments and geographic locations that speak to the needs of certification to those standards. And with that, we are very pleased to have partnered with ICSA Labs to begin offering initially the pilot concept in the 2013 Connectathon, and moving forward in the future, the concept of certification on the use and incorporation of IHE profiles as standards in conjunction with other specifications. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mike Nussbaum, and he's going to talk in more, and Steve Gauss, and talk in more detail about ICSA Labs and what their service offering is and working with IHE USA.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning, those of you in North America, and good afternoon, those of you who are joining from Europe. Happy holidays to you. My name is Steve Gauss. I'm the Business Development Manager for ICSA Labs, and I'm delighted to be here with you today and really excited to be joining in partnership with IHE USA on a certification program. I want to just briefly go through our team on the ICSA Labs side and then talk a little bit about our organization before turning it over to Mike to actually jump into the meat of the program. I've been with the labs for close to 2 years. I came to the labs from a small, about 150-person organization that was a medical transcription company. And then prior to that, I spent close to 20 years in telecommunications, most of it with Siemens. And 100 years ago, I started out selling surgical instruments for a division of Johnson & Johnson. So what I'm most excited about at ICSA Labs, it's been an opportunity for me to join both IT and telecommunications as well as healthcare. And this is squarely fitting in that wheelhouse. On our side today, joining us on the call, we have Michelle Knighton, who is our testing manager. Michelle came to us 2 years ago when we became one of the ONC certified testing bodies. She previously had been at CCHIT, and prior to that was actually a health information manager at a provider. Mike Nussbaum, who will be doing the majority of the program today. I'll let Mike give you a little bit more on his background when he picks up the microphone. Vinny Secor, who's our moderator on the call today, is a special projects manager. Vinny came to the labs a little over a year ago. Prior to that, he'd been with a breach response organization and opened up their healthcare practice. And a prior life to that was the chief technology officer at a software and consulting business, as well as a chief technology officer at the medical transcription company that I had worked at. Also joining us today is Dr. Elliot Sloan. Many of you in IHE are familiar with Elliot, and he actually needs no introduction or background. And then also joining us in Chicago is Amit Trivedi. Amit is our program manager for our healthcare practice and joined us about 2 years ago when we became an ONC testing and certification body. Prior to that, he had been at CCHED as well. Next slide, please. You may not recognize our acronym, but it actually stands for the International Communication Security Association. 23 years ago, we actually started as a not-for-profit association. And if you think about the Internet 20-some-odd years ago, we're going back to nearly the dawn of time. And the industry was having some difficulty, especially among the antivirus software community. Many of the viruses were felt to be developed by the software companies, designed to get you sick and then sell you a cure and then keep you healthy. So the industry came together and formed a consortia and asked us to be the third-party independent testing and certification body to basically attest to the consumers that the products did in fact do what they were supposed to do. So we went about upon a pretty significant change in our business, and have since crossed over and have been a for-profit entity that is one of the most trusted names in the security testing and certification space, and did that for much of our history until about 2 years ago when we re-entered the healthcare space to become one of the ONC's testing and certification bodies. All of our analysts are extremely well versed in HIPAA compliance, as demonstrated by our experience with the ONC program, and are quite experienced as well as up to date on any of the regulations and requirements for meaningful use. Our accreditations are many and numerous. Some days at the labs it feels like Groundhog Day, and that we go through 8 outside independent audits per year to maintain our ISO accreditations. And we are 9001 certified, as well as 17025, and recently Guide 65. Next slide, please. The accreditations are before you, and the dates of about when we were accredited. Why are they important? Well, for many of the folks that we do testing contracts for, and in our business model, all of the software, hardware providers pay for the tests, if you will. And once they successfully pass, they go up on our website, and they can utilize that for competitive differentiation from companies who have not been tested or certified. It obviously reinforces credibility, builds trust among the vendors and the purchasers, and especially from an ISO perspective, is internationally recognized, and it resonates extremely well with any of the government requirements. At this point, what I'd like to do is turn the telephone over to Mike Nussbaum, who will walk you through the meat of the program. Thank you all, and welcome.
Hello, everyone. It's Mike Nussbaum here, and I know many of you are familiar with me and my name. I've been around IHE for about 12 years, and it gives me great pleasure to be part of this new and exciting initiative and part of this program. I have a long-standing background in industrial engineering and health services administration. I live on the West Coast, and I've been on the IHE International Board for many, many years and been very involved and visible with IHE, especially around the Connectathons in North America and also with the interoperability showcases that pop up around the world. So it's a pleasure for me to join Elliot Sloan, who also works with me on the IHE International Board. He's in fact the co-chair of that board, and he and I are program consultants to this initiative and bring together the experiences of IHE and the needs for certification that have been discussed for so many years in the IHE community with a real program that is now being launched as a pilot. I'd like to introduce the topic by just talking about the pilot itself, and it's important for everyone to understand that we are just at the very beginning of a long road to establish certification, and this is a pilot initiative in conjunction with the 2013 North American Connectathon in Chicago. So it's very important that that you all understand that we are learning as we go, and we expect lots of feedback as to how this program will unfold. The pilot is designed to establish certification services and build those services in the future, and I want to just bring that into some context. First of all, this pilot will be at the North American Connectathon this year, but it's intended that certification services will be available in many other events, as Jim mentioned earlier, including other Connectathons in North America starting in 2014. We also will be introducing certification in conjunction with other events such as virtual Connectathons and, as Jim mentioned, projectathons and probably other events as well. So this is the first of a road of opportunity for vendors and systems to elect to go down the certification track. The other part of this pilot is that we're limiting the number of IHE profiles that we will be certifying as part of this pilot. These profiles have been selected to help us best understand how to exercise certification for IHE profiles in the context of IHE profiles, and while we will be starting with a limited set of profiles at the North American Connectathon in 2013, our intent is to extend this to incorporate all IHE profiles that have been published in final text. So that is the intent of the program. I also want to point out that this certification is being conducted under the auspices of IHE USA. For those of you in the IHE community, you'll of course understand that the deployment committees, such as IHE USA, have full responsibility for establishing IHE services within their domains, their regional or national domains. IHE USA is bringing this to the U.S. It is fully intended to explore the notion of certification services in other jurisdictions as well that are under the auspices of other national and regional deployment committees, such as Canada, Europe, Asia, etc. And while we will beginning our learnings in the U.S., the intent is to look at the feasibility of offering certification services all around the world. Next slide, please. So with that, let's just talk about certification in the context of the continuum that includes the Connectathons. And of course, we at IHE are very proud of the Connectathons. Connectathons have been in place for many years and are well understood and also highly valued in the industry as an opportunity for vendors to bring their systems together for peer-to-peer testing, which is of extreme value, and the Connectathon provides an opportunity that is not equaled anywhere else in the life cycle and anywhere else in the world, to my understanding. We want to look at certification services as an extension to the Connectathon testing, and we feel that the Connectathon testing is a very important and necessary entry point to certification services. So think of it as a continuum where the Connectathon provides pre-testing and peer-to-peer testing as it has for many, many years, and those that are successful in passing Connectathon tests can then elect, and again I emphasize elect, this is a voluntary program, to move forward into certification services. Certification services actually are conducted in two parts. There's certification testing and then the certification itself, and there's a number of steps associated with those, and we'll discuss those in a later slide. So think of this as a continuum and a very important connection to the Connectathon. Next slide, please. This is a high-level view of how we envision process flows for that continuum, and again, there are very distinct boundaries between Connectathon testing, certification testing, and certification. Connectathon testing is intended to be conducted as it always has, without any change. It's completely business as usual. for Connectathon testing, and will be providing other services as an adjunct to that, but it should not impact the Connectathon testing at all. As I mentioned earlier, a pass on a Connectathon test becomes the entry point for certification testing. We feel that if a vendor and a system is not successful at Connectathon testing, they probably will not be successful in certification testing. So we see this as crossing the first boundary, and once into certification testing, there are a number of tests that, a number of steps that will be conducted, and they're illustrated on this slide, around certification testing. The certification testing will be done by a separate and distinct team, not the Connectathon monitors, but a certification testing team. We're calling these inspectors for the time being. And these tests are being done under the auspices, of course, of ISO specifications. And so there's a little bit more rigor than we are used to in the Connectathon testing. Some of the Connectathon tests may be repeated, and others may be enhanced. The testing will then create a testing report and worksheet that is used as input for the next step. And again, there is a boundary between certification testing and certification, which is a requirement of the ISO specifications. Those two steps must be done independently by independent groups. So the first certification steps are done by a second or a third group, if you will, of evaluators and certification grantors, leading to the publication of certification and then the product surveillance. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we looked at the profiles that we thought we might want to begin with in the pilot, and this is a list of those profiles that we thought would be appropriate to consider. This is, of course, a subset of all the profiles being tested at the North American Connectathon in 2013. But these have been selected on a number of, based on a number of criteria. First of all, these profiles, to some extent, represent the low-hanging fruit. These are profiles that have been around for some time. They're mature. They have mature tests and experiences behind the testing, both on the tooling side and on the peer-to-peer testing side. And many vendors have signed up for this Connectathon, this upcoming Connectathon, to test on these profiles. And so we thought that this would be a good list and an appropriate list to begin with and garner some learnings. This list was modified to some extent to reflect priorities relevant to the U.S. realm, that is, to help vendors and systems prepare for the requirements in the U.S. around meaningful use. And so there have been a couple of modifications to this list based on that. It is a constrained set of profiles, and only constrained for the purposes of this pilot, as I mentioned, at subsequent events, including events that may be happening in 2013, we will be expanding the profiles that we'll be offering for certification. Vendors will register to have their systems certified in the role of one or more actors and one or more profiles. We call these testable units. This is exactly equivalent to how registration for the Connectathon testing happens. A vendor comes to the table with a system, and that system will act in the capacity of an actor within a profile. That is a testable unit, and those testable units will become the basis for certification. More on that later. This list is also probably more extensive than those we will actually be using to certify, because it's entirely dependent on the vendor's willingness to test and to certify. So again, as I mentioned, it is a voluntary program for certification. If vendors sign up for certain of these profiles and for this testing and certification and not others, then this list, of course, will be reduced. So we are opening the applications for certification and certification testing to this group of profiles, but at the end of the day, the final list might be something that is a little less than this. Next slide, please. So one of the issues that everyone is interested in is what all this is going to cost, and of course there's always a cost associated with these types of events. Certification has been around for some time, and there are different levels of certification offered around the world, and these come with considerable effort, and so there is a price associated with this. We understand that this is a pilot, and we are offering, as a result of that, special introductory pricing for this year's Connectathon only, the 2013 North American Connectathon. So let me walk through what the pricing is going to look like. First of all, the minimum entry point is what's called a basic certification, which is a 5-pack. A 5-pack allows the testing of up to 5 testable units. A testable unit, as I mentioned, is a combination of an actor and a profile. So vendors will typically come to the table with several items that they would like to test and get certified within a profile or across multiple profiles. These are all testable units. So the entry point is $7,500 for a 5-pack. Vendors might want to add additional tests for certification, and that can be added in as single test units at $2,000 a piece or as 5-packs, and there's a slight break in the price to do that. As many of you know about certification has to be maintained. Again, this is required from the ISO specifications, and there are activities associated with maintenance of certification. We'll talk a little bit about this later. For the purposes of this pilot for the North American Connectathon, while we gain our learnings, we will be waiving the fees associated with maintenance of certification. So let's just go through the explanatory notes so that everything is crystal clear. The pricing is for the 2013 North American Connectathon participants only, and it's a pilot event, and we're limiting it to this, the participants at this Connectathon for the purposes of the pilot. We'll be opening up far and wide after that, but for the purposes of this pilot, it's the North American Connectathon. Purchased units, that is the 5-packs or single tests that are not utilized at the Connectathon. So say a vendor signs up a system for the Connectathon for 5 or 6 testable units and only gets through 3 of them, we will allow for a period of 1 year from the Connectathon date at another IHE USA certification event, those units that have been purchased to be utilized, so it doesn't cost any more to complete those tests. And that's very important to understand, in that while we learn at the pilot, it may not be feasible for us to complete all, or for vendors to complete all of the steps necessary to achieve certification, and we recognize that, and so it will reflect that your commitment and investment to certification for this year will be maintained for the period of 1 year, up to but not including the 2014 North American Connectathon, just so it's very clear. So again, the certification itself is based on the units, the testable units that go through the testing and certification process, just like the Connectathon. And again, the testable unit is a vendor system, and a very specific vendor system playing the role of an actor in a profile. It's very important to understand that certification will be granted to a very specific product and version of your system. So if you have multiple systems in play, each one of those has to go through separate certification steps, and the certification will be tied to that specific product and the version. Next slide, please. Of course, I think most of you on the call really understand that certification is the next logical step. We have been talking about this for many, many years, and we know it is leading us down or up the road to higher quality and reliability of our systems, and allowing purchasers of our systems to have more confidence in their ability to interoperate. So it's the next extension. For those vendors that bring their products through certification, we recognize that there are additional steps, and we also recognize that for the purposes of this pilot, we will be relying on the vendors that are going through these steps to help us build a better program. So in recognition of that, we will be establishing a number of opportunities to recognize that commitment, and let me go through these. At the Connectathon, at every Connectathon for North America, including the one upcoming this January, there is a Connectathon conference. And at that Connectathon conference, that occurs on the Wednesday, it's part of the Connectathon tours as well, but there's a conference associated with that. We will be pre-announcing those vendors and systems that are registered for certification. So that is the first opportunity to get recognition for your participation in the pilot itself. Once the Connectathon is complete and the certification steps are complete, we will be issuing a very special press release showcasing the first certifications to come from this program. For those vendors that have elected to sign up for this program, you will be recognized for doing that and be part of that press release that will be showcasing your successes. As part of the certification, and I think you noticed it in the process flow diagrams, there will be a certification registry that will be established by ICSA Labs to properly publish and make that certification information available. And that registry will hopefully also be linked to the existing IHE product registry that is supported as part of the Gazelle system that you're all familiar with. So we have not established that yet, but we're hoping that will further the continuum between the IHE life cycle and the certification steps by having that link in the product registry that will point to the certification registry itself. And we have a commitment from HIMSS that at this year's Interoperability Showcase, which is coming up in March of 2013, that there will be a special recognition of those vendors and those systems that have successfully established certification as a result of this pilot and in any subsequent events that will be offered. Next slide, please. So we know that there are a number of questions that you may have, and again, we would ask you to submit those questions to us. We've thought about what you might be asking, and we've put these questions out here in the next couple of slides. So let's go through them. So the very first thing is, how can vendors get more information? There's always more information to be requested, and we have provided you all of the information we have at this point. We are very aggressively building this pilot program between now and the Connectathon, and we will be putting new information out on a regular basis. If you have specific questions, you can write to us we have established an email address at ihecert@ihelabs.com. Please take the time to write to us, ask your questions. We'd be more than happy to respond to the best of our ability, and as we, of course, come up with more details of what this process will look like at the Connectathon, we will publish that to you. How should vendors sign up? So if you are interested in signing up for the pilot and you are confident that you are ready to sign up and will pass those Connectathon tests, then you can actually sign up right now by sending us an email again at that ihecert@icelabs.com, and we'll follow up with you. We will be building a proper registration facility to allow a more structured registration to be submitted between now and the Connectathon. But if you're interested in signing up right away, we will take care of that for you by just sending us an email. So what will be the process once the vendors sign up for certification? We will take care of all the steps. There are a number of administrative requirements that are dictated through the specifications of ISO, and a lot of documentation that has to be put together, and we will take care of all of the documentation requirements as well as any procedures that we will be using during the Connectathon and after the Connectathon. So just indicate that you're interested in moving forward, and we'll take care of the rest. To the question, what can vendors expect to see in advance of the Connectathon and on the Connectathon floor? So first of all, you're encouraged to register for certification now before the Connectathon. That will allow you to take advantage of the special recognition that we'll be offering in advance of the Connectathon. But we are not limiting it to registration in advance of the Connectathon, although we would encourage it. You will be able to register on the Connectathon floor as you complete your Connectathon tests. So if you come to the Connectathon and you think you may want to do it, but you're not sure, then you have the ability to seek out the team that will be handling the certification components and establish your registration there. If you register early, of course, it will give us time to orient you to the process and work out all of the details, and there are a number of details that we're learning as we go with this pilot as well. But on the floor, the certification team will be clearly identifiable, just as the Connectathon monitors are clearly identifiable, usually with T-shirts that are very loud and very recognizable. We will be available to answer any questions prior to and during the certification activities that will occur during the Connectathon week. Next slide, please. So what happens after the Connectathon? So certification steps will be completed, and if they're not completed at the Connectathon, they will be completed immediately following the Connectathon. And following the completion of all the certification steps, vendors will be issued a certification mark. There will be opportunities for special publicity, as I've mentioned, around the success of early certified systems. And will the pilot be evaluated? Absolutely. We are all very interested in how this pilot works out, and we want to consistently improve the process and make the certification steps truly meaningful to our industry. Certification is intended to add value, and we want to make the certification process as lean as we possibly can to allow that value to be maximized. And next slide, please. So at this point in time, we anticipate a number of questions have been submitted, and I'll turn it back over to Vinny to pose those questions to myself and to the certification team that is actually gathered on this call with me. Vinny?
Thanks, Mike.
Before Vinny comments on or brings the questions forward, just to comment further on Mike's note about being able to identify us on the floor at the Connectathon in Chicago. If you look at the logo for the ICSA Labs, the blue technically is called steel blue, and we will be in steel blue hoodies with our ICSA logo. So we will stand out. We may not have the bright orange vest that the volunteers and the moderators have, but you will be able to find us, and we'll be more than glad to help you out if you don't get to pre-register, but we're looking forward to as many trying to pre-register as possible. Thanks, Vinny.
Thanks, Steve. So we have a number of questions, and some of them are duplicates. So I'm going to consolidate them and try to ask the questions and that are on topic, and then there are additional questions might be tangential to those. So I'll kind of organize them by theme. So the first question, Mike, is what is a testable unit, and is it an actor and a profile, and can you give us an example?
Sure, and I think I covered some of this in the slide presentation, so just let me review it because it's really important for us all to understand what this is. So the pieces of your interoperability testing that will be evaluated for certification will be based on you coming to the table with a product that is acting in a role of an actor within a profile. So, for example, you might come to test at the Connectathon your role as an XDS consumer, which is an actor in the XDS profile. That's one example. You may actually have a product that provides multiple roles in that profile. That same product could also participate in multiple profiles. If you're in fact testing for XDS, you will be participating in multiple profiles like consistent time and ATNA and PICS or PDQ. So you will have multiple roles and multiple profiles typically. So each of these role profiles or actor profile combinations is a testable unit, and each one will be appropriately evaluated and certification issued on that basis.
Thanks, Mike. I think the next question that we'll cover is sort of two questions. The first question is the team that does the certification, are they different from the team that does the Connectathon? And then the second question, which I think is along the same lines, and you could probably answer at the same time, is will the results from the Connectathon be used for the certification? And I'll go ahead and move our slide back to the process flow to help out with visuals.
Sure, thanks, Vinny. And I'll ask Elliot to perhaps back me up. I'll just start by basically reiterating the fact that ISO specifications require that independence over the three components of the continuum of the life cycle between Connectathon testing through certification testing through the certification activities itself. So the evaluators in each of those components will be separate and distinct and clearly identifiable. we mentioned, Connectathon monitors typically wear very bright colors. Our testing team will be wearing less bright colors but identifiable colors, and our certification team is, again, another independent group. Elliot, do you want to comment further on that?
Yes. Thanks, Mike. The ISO Guide 65 for certification bodies is very specific in requiring separation of testing activities from certification activities. For the basic reason is that prevents conflicts of interest or helps avoid conflicts of interest because testing services are typically paid, perhaps reasonably expensive payments for testing. The certification body is separate so that it is not influenced by payment or testing methodologies. The certification body therefore sees the test results from a authorized testing laboratory as an independent set of documents and compares those against the certification criterion, and then makes the decision to issue the certificate for the particular product. The certification testing itself is also under a very rigorous standard, ISO 17025, and that is for testing laboratories. And the ISO 17025 is very specific and rigorous in the documentation required of the testing methodologies, the validation of the testing methodologies, the independence of the testing body from any possible conflicts of interest, which could include also training, teaching, or helping, coaching, mentoring the product or organization whose products are being tested. And because of this, we have testing or separation between the Connectathon, which is very much a collaborative, consultative environment, and the role of the monitors and the IHE Connectathon team with the vendors, from the certification testing, which is being done under the ISO 17025 standard, and then the certification, which is being done under the Guide 65 standards. Mike, hopefully that helps clarify that question.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. That's great. And to the question, to Vinny's question that he posed on will the results of the Connectathon be used for certification, we've discussed that a lot and have come to the conclusion that the Connectathon pass-fail is the only criteria that we will be using to begin and to basically gate vendors to apply for certification testing and certification. From the certification testing steps and the certification steps, the evaluators will not be referring to any of the details that were gathered and evaluated at the Connectathon other than a successful pass of those of a particular test that is related to a testable unit. That is the only item. So for those of you who are have participated for many years in Connectathon testing, the information that is collected is completely separate and kept completely separate from all subsequent steps. I hope that clarifies and answers the question, Vinny.
And if I could, this is Elliot again, just if I could step in and add some additional perspectives, Mike. The separation of the Connectathon test and test results from this allows some streamlining of the certification testing at the Connectathon. Vendors we know will have already spent quite a bit of time, perhaps several days, going through the Connectathon tests, and having them go through the exact same tests again would add perhaps more burden than the time allows. So we're using that to help accelerate the certification testing. It's worth noting that in the future, when we do independent freestanding certification, those kinds of tests may be duplicated or elaborated differently. But in this case, we're trying to be respectful of the time people have invested already in the Connectathon, and it also helps ensure that when the vendors bring their products to the certification testing, all of the parties already have been through the Connectathon testing, which increases the reliability and our likelihood of being able to bring the whole group and the products successfully through the certification testing in the time we have allowed.
Just one more comment before we leave this topic, and I think this is a topic that is of interest to most of you on the call. We are very busy putting together a program guide to support this certification and the certification testing associated with IHE USA. In that program guide will be all of the details that you will be looking for related to how the testing and the certification steps will be executed. And so what we haven't covered here, you will expect to be receiving in further documentation between now and the Connectathon. Over to you, Vinny.
Thanks, Mike. You actually covered one of the other questions, which was what type of materials will the vendors be provided prior to certification. So I'll check that one off the list. You know, since we're talking about certification, I'll put one more question out there that is relevant to the graphic we have up in the PowerPoint. And so with regards to maintenance, from a vendor perspective, what is involved in maintenance of the certification in terms of fees, activities, and documentation?
Thanks, Vinny. And again, I want to just introduce this response by saying that many of these details are currently still being worked out. So just so you know, we will be publishing a lot more detail shortly on this. As most of you know, certification is issued, and certification needs to be maintained. These are covered in the ISO standards. The maintenance of that certification requires that the vendor systems are periodically surveyed to ensure that that certification is still valid and still intact, that there haven't been changes to the product is still designed and operates as it was always intended, and these steps are required annually, and the certifications are maintained annually through this maintenance initiative. And the details of that maintenance activity will be forthcoming very soon as part of the program guide. Of course, with any activity, there are fees associated with that, and as we mentioned, we are going to be waiving the fees for the purposes of the pilot. But in the future, there will be fees associated with the maintenance of these certifications that are issued, and they'll be commensurate with the amount of effort that is expended in order to conduct those maintenance activities according to the ISO standards and specifications. Important to understand that a vendor may choose to keep a product on the market and in fact have that certification maintained. As long as that vendor wants to keep that product in play, that certification can stay with that particular product and version until the vendor decides that they no longer want to have that product and version on the market and in fact voluntarily elect to not require subsequent certification. It's also important to note that a vendor may have multiple versions of a single product or multiple products that all require their own certification associated to that specific product, and all of those certifications, of course, will be run through the maintenance of certification program associated with it. I hope that covers the question. Mike,
this is Elliot again. I'd like to chime in again a little bit related to the ISO Guide 65 requirements. And in the ISO guidelines, certification marks have to be perishable. In other words, they can't remain forever. They have an expiration date and can be renewed. Under the Guide 65 framework, that helps ensure that products through the years are still conformant with the original certification. So in this case, for this Connectathon in 2013, the products that are certified will have their second year of maintenance included and waived. However, in years beyond that, if the product is going to be maintained in its same form and if the manufacturer wishes to have that product certification continued, say in year 3, 4, and 5, then they'll have that option at a price to be determined by the market cost. The maintenance part includes, as you mentioned, the surveillance of the product, the website, the use of the mark, and all of those are very clearly stated in the Guide 65 documentation. hopefully that's helpful as people try to understand how this certification and how the marking is maintained through the long cycle of use and ownership.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Elliot. I've got another question here, which is that in regards to the ICSA Labs testing, will the information gathered from the testing and the tools and other profiles that are created, will that information be shared with the community, the Gazelle community, and the current Connectathon community?
So I'm not sure if I clearly understand the question, but let me take a stab. So the information that is collected as part of the certification testing and certification steps will be restricted and made available only to those participating in the certification and certification testing and the evaluators, of course. And so what comes out of that is, in fact, the certification mark. The link to Gazelle, there are two pieces where the certification is published, and aside from press and other opportunities. One is through a certification registry, which we will be establishing at ICSA Labs, where the certification mark and the full description of what that certification entails will be in part of that registry, and will be maintained by ICSA, as I've mentioned. The Gazelle system has a component, as you all know, that includes a product registry, and that product registry goes as far as to indicate that a particular system, a vendor system in a particular testable unit actor profile combination has in fact passed the Connectathon test, and currently vendors self-attest to that pass by issuing integration statements, and these are all linked at the product registry level. When we raise the bar to certification, we are going to be working with the Gazelle folks to incorporate another column, if you will, in the product registry that will basically attest to the fact that a vendor has taken his or her product through certification steps with an appropriate link to the certification registry. So it will no longer be self-attestation for those that go through certification, but attestation from a third-party ISO-accredited body, ICSA Labs. So that will be the primary difference. All of the details and information associated with the testing and certification will not be published, only the publication of the certification.
This is Elliot again. To also chime in here, I think that another interpretation of the question, Vinny, is whether the test methods themselves and or the testing data will be made public. And I think the answer is, in general, the test methods under Guide 65 and 17025 would be visible for future certification organizations. However, the test data is not available. The test data is blind data that the certification agency maintains on its own. So ICSA Labs will be maintaining that separately. The methods, the actual incorporation of the methods or programs or tests the use of those for the Connectathon or Gazelle will depend on the Connectathon and Gazelle teams as to the appropriateness of some of those methods for their own use. But the two are quite distinct, and the certification is not meant to force the Gazelle system or the Connectathon organization or orchestration or process to be changed.
Let me just add one further point. Thanks, Elliot. And again, it got me thinking about what may be behind this question. We mentioned that the certification testing would have its own level of rigor, again, associated with the ISO standards. And so, how does that differ from the Connectathon testing itself? And we mentioned that we have the ability to repeat some of those tests under more rigorous monitoring than we would normally do at the Connectathon. We also have the opportunity to exercise the tests with more optionality. So some of the tests at the Connectathon only exercise certain optionality. We have the opportunity then to exercise all of the optionality. And I think as Elliot indicated, we would have the ability to flow through some additional test data or some separate test data through the certification testing that hasn't been used in the Connectathon testing to, again, help exercise your conformance with the requirements of that particular testable unit through its full, full breadth and with the rigor of monitoring that is required in order to move to the certification steps. So we are currently, as I mentioned, developing the specifics on this, and as you can imagine, it will vary profile to profile. We will have that information shortly, and that information, of course, will be published. We want vendors to be prepared for the certification testing and fully understand what's involved. For those of you who have been participating in the Connectathons this year and other years, you'll have a very good understanding of what's really behind this. We're going to just take it to the next level of rigor, and we'll tell you exactly what that entails.
This is Jim. Let me pipe in from the IHE USA perspective as well. That the Connectathon, from our perspective as IHE USA as well as IHE International, is always an evolving. It aims for self-improvement as tools change, as interoperability needs change. And to the extent in our own strategic plans concerning the evolution of the Connectathon process, the use of Gazelle and ISO standards and ISO certification, we see a great partnership with ICSA Labs being able to contribute back and offering their expertise and guidance around ISO processes and procedures that we can further incorporate, not just for the IHE USA North American Connectathon, but for Connectathons in general, and improve the testing process globally. That's just something I want to add as well.
Thanks, Jim. From an ICSA Labs perspective, I think one comment I'd like to make in support and in response to the question that we've been discussing is, it's our intent and our desire to support and contribute to the growth and improvement of both the Connectathon and Gazelle. And, wherever appropriate, as Elliot described and Mike described, we'll use the information that we gather to both grow and improve on the Connectathon and Gazelle where we can. And that's part of our mission. That's part of our desire. Switching back to the questions, we do have a couple more that I think we have time for. I think the next question is participation in the January event limited to systems that have already signed up for the January Connectathon?
And I think thanks, Vinny. And I think the short answer to that is yes, and it's only yes because we're looking at constraining the pilot. So we first looked at those that were registered at the 2013 Connectathon as those that could potentially apply to have the certification testing and certification steps added, again, on a voluntary basis. It's only limited to that group because we want to constrain the opportunity for, constrain the steps that we would have to undertake while we're evaluating. We anticipate that very shortly after this Connectathon, we will be able to open up the opportunity for vendors to bring their systems forward for certification at other events or independently, and we'll be using the results of this pilot to help us determine how best to do that. So again, the limitation is strictly artificial. We know that there are a number of vendors who have participated in past Connectathons and have successfully had their testable units, if you will, pass those Connectathon tests, and we know that those vendors will also want to be participating in the certification program. Very shortly after this North American Connectathon this coming January, we will be able to get back to that community with opportunities to enroll in the certification programs.
Thanks, Mike. With that last comment of yours, it ties into another question, and so maybe we'll use this question just to clarify. So someone asked, if they've passed a prior Connectathon, can they come to an event like the January event and pay for the certification but not for the Connectathon?
So again, for the purposes of the pilot, no, and only because we want to keep that constrained. In the future, we will be looking at how best to offer certification services to the broad array of vendors that want to get that certification for use in North America or in the U.S. And we will perhaps at the 2014 Connectathon have some other options available. But we are not. We want to ensure that the systems that come in for certification testing have gone through the Connectathon testing prior to that. We think that's very important. So we're not encouraging vendors to come for certification steps directly at this point. We're looking at only those vendors that have gone through the Connectathon rigor. And for this year, it'll only be the current Connectathon participants, at least for this event. But hopefully shortly thereafter, we'll find ways to loop in the rest.
Thanks, Mike. There was one question that you had already answered, which I'll just repeat the answer to, and I think that'll close out our question and answer period. And the question was, where can I find the extended test specifications for each of the profiles being tested? And that was the answer to that question is we're developing a program manual, and those test plans will be in there. So if you have any other comments on that, Mike, that you want to add, or Elliot, let's make that our last question.
No, I think we've actually covered that, and all the information we have at this point we've shared with you, so we will be inundating you with additional information and documentation in the weeks ahead. Elliot?
I think that's correct, and the test methodology, as I had mentioned earlier, is going to be visible ultimately to any certification participant so they understand in advance what they are going to be undertaking. And this is another area that distinguishes the certification process from the Connectathon. The Connectathon is a much more consultative, interactive, pedagogic learning experience, experiential learning process for vendors and monitors and even the profile developers. And the certification is a much more black and white, cut and dried testing and evaluation process and methodology. The two stand, they're very complementary. They're very important to the industry, but they represent different values and different opportunities and ultimately different impact for products in this field.
Thank you, Elliot. With that, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation. I'd like to thank Jim St. Clair and the team from IHE USA as well as the team from ICSA Labs. We will have this information available. That was a question that came in as will this webinar and these slides be available. We will have them available. They'll definitely be on the ICSA Labs website on the certification program page, as well as they may appear on the IHE USA site as well. We'll notify everybody via email and let them know when the registration link, when the webinar link is available. With that, I'm going to turn the call back over to the moderator, and they're going to close out the meeting.